How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Honda. When you test drive the all-electric Prologue SUV, there's a lot that could impress you about it. There's the generous passenger space, the clean, thoughtful design, and the intuitive technology. But out of everything, what you'll really love most is that it's a Honda. Visit honda.com/EV to see offers.
New Icy Hot. Nighttime recovery. Relieves pain at nighttime while your body recovers. Icy Hot. You're so back.
The grandstands are on their feet here. British triathlon history is about to be made, and the woman that's going to make it is Vicky Holland, who turns into the home straight. She has her arms outstretched. She's able to enjoy the victory. She punches the air. She turns to those grandstands. She claps and she points. She is so happy as she walks across that line. She grabs the finish line. She looks to the skies. The first British woman ever to win this event, Vicky Holland, who 12 months ago was stood next to me commentating on this event for television. She has won the Leeds leg of the World Triathlon Series. The day, the event and Leeds belongs to Vicky Holland.
Well, more on that shortly. A throwback to 2018 and Vicky Holland winning the World Series Triathlon event in Leeds. Now, Vicky, who won bronze at the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio and became world champion in 2018, is involved with a new campaign from British Triathlon, focusing on women in sport. I'm Michael.
And I'm John, and in 2024, Vicky returned after the birth of her daughter, Emmy, to international competition to become the European champion. British Triathlon recently announced a new pregnancy deferral policy for their female triathletes, meaning that women who qualify for an age group championship race at UK, European and World Championship level can defer their slot in the GB team for up to 2 years.
Hi, I am Vicky Holland. I'm a recently retired professional athlete. During my career, I won an Olympic bronze medal, a world title, Commonwealth medals, and I became European champion in 2024 as a mum.
Well, Vicky, it's great to catch up with you. Let's just get the details right. You are now a retired triathlete. You've stepped off the elite circuit. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I did my last triathlon in October of 24. After about 19 years in the sport, it was time.
Was one of the reasons behind that stepping off obviously becoming a mother, or was it more than that?
No, it wasn't really anything to do with that at all. I was 38 at the time that I decided to retire. If I'd carried on this season, I would have already turned 39 by the time the season started. And, you know, it was a decision to come back to sport after having my daughter that was probably the most difficult one to make. As for the actual retirement, that was a lot easier because I always knew when I decided to come back, I only really wanted a shot for like a year. I just wanted to see what I could do, what was possible for me, maybe try and encourage others what might be possible for them as well. If that's a career avenue they want to go down, a life avenue they want to go down. But I never came back to triathlon after having my daughter to try and do another 5 years in the sport. That wasn't the aim. And it kind of worked out pretty much perfectly in the end. I finished my career with 2 great results right at the end of that 2024 season. And for me, that was just perfect. That was how I wanted to retire and how I wanted to be remembered in this sport.
We have seen, haven't we, a bit of a sea change of opinion about people coming back into elite sport after having children. In fact, it was one of the real features, wasn't it, of the last Summer Olympics with the likes of Helen Glover and Charlie Davis in the boxer. Lots of people were talking about mums being part of Team GB. Have we gone far enough, though?
Oof, probably not, no. If I'm really honest, I think we're still in this position, as you said, of sea change. This feels like a moment where things are starting to change. And there are guidelines from UK sport as to how to support mothers. A lot of those are around sort of the physical needs and the emotional needs. as opposed to maybe more of the logistical and the understanding and allowing enough time for those mothers to maybe show what they're made of and to get back into sport. There's relatively strong evidence now that women who go away to have children come back into sport and, around 18 months postpartum start achieving really great results. And so I think the moment the policy UK Sport has, which is a starting point, of course, saying around 9 months, you are funded. If you're a funded athlete, you continue to keep your funding through pregnancy and for 9 months postpartum, at which point you can be reassessed. Now, the assessment is open to sort of interpretation from sport to sport. And I feel like that's probably cutting it a bit short. I think 9 months postpartum isn't really a huge amount of time. It does state that should be assessed on their future potential, but it's really hard to know how you're going to assess that when maybe this person hasn't competed for a year and a half or more at that point because of the time they've had to take out through pregnancy, etc. And I honestly think if British Triathlon had sort of gone on the strictest lines they could have done with that policy, then I would not have retained my funding after 9 months postpartum. But I feel really, really lucky that I was supported by a federation who I think are leading the charge on this side of things. They did everything they possibly could for me to try and help my return and make it as easy as possible. And it still wasn't easy, but they did everything they could to help me. And I think more federations probably could do a little bit more. But equally, I guess I can only really truly speak from the one that I'm a part of.
Yeah, we have seen and heard some absolute horror stories, haven't we, from athletes who have got pregnant and then obviously have been ditched, whether it's a federation or whether it's a sponsorship deal. That's happened as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, and then there's obviously people in team sports fighting for a position in their team again, which is incredibly difficult, and it can often lead to people thinking that they need to get back there quicker than they should be because they've got to go and try and retain that team place or to try and retain funding. So I think there is still quite a lot of pressure in certain sports to try and show that you can do it. And I think it's so individual how quickly you can come back. What's happened to you either during your pregnancy or during birth, what happens immediately after, whether your baby sleeps particularly well or doesn't. All these sorts of things play a huge part in how quickly you can and should come back to sport. Whereas it feels still that a blanket kind of time period isn't always super helpful. Whilst I do appreciate that within the UK we are doing things, which I think in some countries they're absolutely not. Maybe there's a little bit more room to go.
Did you notice attitudes change during your career? Would it have been the same, for example, had you become pregnant at the start of your career? Have things moved on?
Oh, yes. I think for a start, I never even thought it was something that I would consider. It requires pretty intense training schedules. But then a huge amount of elite sports do that as well. They require a lot of time in gyms or on hockey pitches or wherever it is, away with teams on camps. So the logistics of it would have been absolutely mind-blowing to me as a youngster. But yeah, there was just no one doing it back then. There was no one's example to follow, really, because it was such an unusual consideration that as a woman, you would take time out of your career as a professional sports person to have a child or more than one child and then come back to it. And really within the last 5 to 10 years, but probably more recently, the last 5 years, really, that it's become something that does happen, that we're now having more and more examples. And it's that sort of age-old saying of you need to see it to be able to believe it and to be able to achieve it. And we need role models and people doing these things.
Did you have any kind of people that you looked at? So, for example, I remember speaking to you in Rio in 2016. You won an Olympic medal, but also on that team was Jessica Ennis-Hill, who'd come back after having a baby. So did you look at people like that and think, yes, it can be done?
Yeah, there were definitely people like Jess Ennis-Hill, who was a real sort of example of what could be done. And we worked with the same physiotherapist as well. So that was helpful, kind of getting some advice on things that they'd done and how they'd worked together. And one of Jess's sort of mantras that I really loved was this idea of postpartum PBs. And so through the later part of her career, as I'm sure you know, she didn't really look at PBs as a whole. She was like, well, what, my body's new now. It's kind of, it's been changed by pregnancy. So what is it capable of postpartum? And I love that idea. I sort of took that on very much of what can my body do now? It's maybe not going to be world champion like it once was, and it's maybe not going to win another Olympic medal, but what can it do? How far can it go? And that was absolutely the attitude I took into my final year. In terms of sort of other role models, I think there have become a few in the sport of triathlon, which is obviously my sport, and not so much within the UK, but further abroad, and particularly in the US, there have been a few women doing it. And in long course triathlon, of course, Ironman, the world championship title, which is always has been won in Kona, it sort of moves around a little bit now, but always synonymous with Kona, was won in October of 2022 by a woman called Chelsea Sodaro, who's an American, and she was 18 months postpartum. And I, at the time, was about 6 months pregnant. And I have to say that was hugely inspiring to me, because it was like, well, there are people showing what you can do in this sport after you've had a child. And it felt so relevant to me because it was my sport. So yeah, I've definitely taken a little bit of inspiration from the other women who've sort of come before me.
And do you think the likes of, say, in your sport, Jess Learmonth, I know Sophie Colbert's pregnant at the minute as well, two fantastic triathletes that we know very well. Do you think perhaps they've looked at what you've done and that has come into their thinking, at least with the federation?
I've no idea if I played into that in any way. I like to think that as the first one to do it, the first one to have a child and then come back and race internationally, that maybe they could possibly look at the things I did well and the things I maybe didn't do so well and take some learnings from that. I hope that they feel that way, and I'm always here for them to talk to if they want to. I received a lovely message from Sophie after my final race. She was actually just at the point of telling people she was pregnant, and so she sort of revealed she was pregnant to me and said, oh, you've made me all emotional, and I hope that maybe I can follow and do what you've done. So yeah, that's really special, and I hope that if she does need any further advice, she knows where to find me.
And you're part of a group of other people that have been in your situation, working with Joe Pinner from GB Hockey.
That's right. Yeah, there's been a group set up on WhatsApp, sort of connected originally, I guess, through this connection we have of UK sports and funded athletes who are pregnant or postpartum. And yeah, there's quite a few. I don't even know how many participants there are now. It's quite a lot. When I first joined, I think there was only about 6 or 7 of us, and now I think there's well over 20. So it's great because it highlights some of the differences still from sport to sport, and some of the different challenges that different sports will inevitably bring up because of the nuances of their sports. But on the whole, it's been a really supportive group to be a part of, and people pop in and ask for advice, and they might be going away on a training camp and wondering how anybody else did it, and any travel advice for little ones and that kind of thing. So it's a good group to be a part of.
And as we said, I mean, Paris was just fantastic as far as mums doing well. For me, Amber Rutter, the skeet shooter, I think she was there 2 months after giving birth to her son, Tommy, and back. And she should have won a gold medal.
I know, she was robbed.
Absolutely cheated out of that. But
I know, she was.
A silver medal. But I guess that the important thing, the bigger thing, is that you are just showcasing to women that they can have children, and it's not the end of being an elite sportswoman.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what I truly acknowledge is that it's not necessarily for everybody. And I never did this, and I don't talk about this as something that, well, you should and you must, and it's important for women. And, it's not that kind of angle that I'm going for. It's more a case of we should have the choice. It should be possible. And as the only sex who can go away and procreate and have the babies, it feels entirely unfair that you should have to give up your sport, your job, or even be penalized more than you need to be to do that. So yes, there's a lot to still be done. There's a lot that already has been done, but it's just really great that there are now more examples across a breadth of sports as well. that are showing it's possible. I mean, even in triathlon, yes, okay, I didn't make it back to the start line in Paris. That was always going to be a bit of a long shot with the timings that I had available to me, but there were 2 women on the start line who were both mothers. So that was pretty cool, and hopefully there'll be more come the next Olympic start line in LA.
Well, I would argue you were on the start line in Paris.
I was close. I wasn't quite on the start line, but I was close.
Because I saw you on the Pont Alexandre Trois Bridge. I was a little bit further down the line, I think, from where you were. Both working, obviously, in the media. But from your point of view, what was it like to be on the other side? Was there part of you that thought, I really want to dive into that Seine despite all the conversations we were having? Yeah. Or was it just part of you thinking, I had a fantastic career and now I'm having this fantastic career and I'm here bringing it to millions on the telly?
Oh, I mean, by the time I was stood there reporting with the BBC, it was very much, no, I'm just really lucky to be here and doing this. There was, of course, a small carrot of the Olympic Games when I decided to return, because when I first got pregnant, even before I got pregnant, I'd nigh on stepped away from the sport. I wasn't really training anymore, and I didn't know if I would come back, even if we did manage to have a child. And so for then, when we did get pregnant, I did have my daughter in late January of 2023. The time scale available to me meant that it was always going to be really, really, really tough. And I only came back into racing in October of 23. So that was, 9 months before the Olympic Games. I had absolutely 0 points because at the time there was no maternity provisions from our governing body, our international governing body, that is World Triathlon. So my ranking had gone from about 10th in the world to, I think, 250th in the world. So I couldn't even get into the races I needed to try and get selected. And it was a race against time. And I think both from a rankings point of view, but also from my performance, I just wasn't ready. And that's okay. I can fully accept and admit that. And by the time I was then actually stood, as you said, on that beautiful bridge in France, I knew that this was cool. This was something that I really wanted to do. I wanted to be involved, and I knew I couldn't be there as an athlete. I was still competing because my final races hadn't happened yet. But what better way to be there if you can't be racing and on the start line than to be there talking about the sport that you love?
I can't chat to you just without having a little bit of a reminisce and a reflect on the career. What was the highlight? Well, being a world champion, an Olympic medal, those magnificent races in Leeds. I mean, how do you look back?
Oh, there are so many, really. There are so many moments that when you ask me that, it's really difficult because, of course, winning an Olympic medal stands above everything in terms of, I think, the magnitude and the length of time that I desperately wanted one of those. I started dreaming about the Olympics when I was 6. And so it was a very long time. It was 24 years later when I won that Olympic medal, and a lifetime pursuit of Olympic success. So that is so, so special to me. Equally, winning a world title, just something I never thought I'd do because of the way it's won in our sport. You have to win it across a series throughout a whole season. And I'd always considered myself a one-day performer. So to do what I did in 2018, that will always be incredibly special. And I never thought I'd be a world champion because of that. Commonwealth Games in 2014 was probably my breakout performance as a senior athlete who'd already been in the sport for 10 years, but hadn't yet managed to kind of get onto any major podiums. And I did it on a glorious day in Glasgow. I know we don't get to say that too often, but it was absolutely amazing that day. And it really, I think, catapulted me on to bigger successes. And then, as you touched upon there, some of the home races I've been to over the years have been incredible. And that first race we ever had here in Leeds was insane. 2016, we had a World Series race, and the crowds were like nothing I've ever seen outside of the London Olympics. It was unreal. I mean, it was similar probably in Paris this year, but I wasn't racing, so I won't compare it. But yeah, those races will always be things that I remember. Just the fact that you couldn't hear your breathing and your feet hitting the floor because of the sounds of the crowd and the amount of people screaming your name specifically for you. You know, they're there cheering you on. That just, yeah, it's just everything you can kind of dream of as an athlete.
I remember your Olympic medal because it's actually one of my most embarrassing moment. See, I don't think you'll remember this, but
No.
I came to see you at the hotel.
Well, I remember that.
Yeah, I came to you, and I sort of said to you, "How are you?" And you said, "Oh yeah, great. How are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm really tired. I've walked miles today." And you said, "Well, I've done the same thing, but not walked."
I honestly don't even remember saying that. But I mean, bit cheeky, but it was true.
No, you were. I think you were quite right to put me in my place. But I just remember saying it, thinking, well, what a ridiculous thing just to be saying to someone that's just won a medal at the Olympics.
Well, for what it's worth, I actually do think that spending tons of time on your feet, stood or walking around, is actually harder than racing. Like the feeling you have afterwards, that is just awful. I hate it.
I'm glad it was you that sort of saw the funny side of it, put it that way. Just let me ask you about the Leeds experiences, because obviously those races were fantastic. I spoke to Johnny and Ali Brownlee just last week, actually. They're trying to bring an event back to Leeds. It's not going to be a World Series. It's going to be a sort of mass participation race. But how important do you think it is to get triathlon, a big triathlon event, going again in Leeds, which is really kind of triathlon central?
Yeah, Leeds has such a great history of triathlon now. Of course, a lot of that was started by Alistair and Johnny and their success, and what they did in London 2012 really ignited a generation of triathletes across the whole country, but especially here in Leeds. And triathlon is well and live here in Leeds, and there are a lot of very, very keen triathletes, both professional and amateur here. So I know if we can get an event here, it will be incredibly well supported. And it is important for sort of the future generations that we still have those events available, that they can come and take part, see what it's like, see the buzz of a triathlon firsthand, and hopefully then decide to give it a go themselves. And that's kind of the only way really that we keep this amazing legacy that we've got in triathlon going for the future generations to come.
Just finally, would you be tempted?
Depends what it is. I don't know anything about this event, to be honest with you, but maybe for a bit of fun, but definitely not to compete. I'm done with that. Thank you very much.
Well, Vicky, always lovely to chat with you, and thank you so much for your time today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Vicky Holland, world and European triathlon champion, multiple Commonwealth Games medalist, Olympic bronze medalist from 2016, speaking on this edition of Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy to Michael. And since they recorded that chat, Vicky's actually announced she's pregnant with her second child, and her former GB teammate Sophie Caldwell has given birth to a baby girl named Phoebe. Huge congratulations to them both from us.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.